Alright, welcome back to phpvideotutorials.com, lesson number 6. It's going to be a pretty crazy lesson, probably as intense as the last lesson. We're going to build a taggable behavior, we're going to build a taggable helper, we're going to build the search for our content management system, and we're also going to build a typable behavior that will allow us to inherit from our models and do some really cool stuff. So put your thinking cap on and we will get into this lesson. So the first thing we want to do is go to map number 5 in the study guides directory, and we want to create the taggable behavior which we didn't do in the last lesson because we were bad. We took an hour to do all that other stuff and we missed out on the taggable behavior, so we need to slap ourselves right on the face. Let's do it. Oh, that hurt a lot. Ouch. I don't like that at all. Actually, you can't really hurt yourself. You can't hit yourself hard enough to hurt yourself, I don't think. Is that even possible? It's like you can't hold your breath to suffocate yourself. Not that I try that, but yeah. Anyway, let's build this taggable behavior. The first thing we have to do is jump into the models directory and the behaviors directory and create a new file. So we'll just create a new file and we'll call it taggable.php and come in here and start up PHP's engine. And that's how PHP sounds when you start it up. Like that. It's very gay, PHP. Alright, let's create this thing. Let's just not be silly today. I'm in a silly mood today, so this lesson may go anywhere. Alright, where were we? New component, new behavior. See? Mental right now. Create behavior. We want to set up a property and we want to call this one settings. It's just like our settings property that we set up in our components that we created in the last lesson. So it's just going to hold settings for things. We can set up some configuration inside our models. We'll say setup, okay, and we want to pass in our model by reference. Alright, and we also want to set up the config param, and we'll just default that to an array. Set up the settings, which we will be able to override inside our models. But I want to do something different inside the settings. Okay, I want to set up another key. Alright, I want this key to have the value of the name of the model using this behavior, and that will allow us to have multiple models using this behavior at the one time. Alright, so that will just separate them out. So now let's set up our default values. So we just need an array merge, and we will roll out some defaults, and we'll call the first default label, and that will be the name of our column, okay, in our post table. We'll call it tags. And we'll also have one, and we'll call this one separator, and we will give it a value of we'll close that off. Give it a value of a comma, and I'll also merge on the config params so we can override that in our models. So that's all looking good. Now we have to use our schema tool or our scalpel tool to create that column. So just make sure you're inside your application directory and we can just run it. So we'll run cake schema and we'll run generate and we'll hit enter. And it's going to tell us what do we want to do. We want to create a snapshot, so we can create a new schema file, and just created schema number 4, and you guys probably remember where they're kept in config SQL, and there's our file here. So let's get rid of all these other tables. We won't need these in there for our schema file. We just need the post table, which we're going to alter now. So how I'm going to do this is just quickly I'm going to grab the title column, copy, and I'm just going to come down here. We'll just go underneath published and we'll just throw it in here, and we'll just call this one tags, and we'll just yeah, look at that, 100 characters. That's about all we need. We'll hit save. We'll come back into our application and we'll run cake schema run update, and we want to run schema file or snapshot number 4, and we hit enter. It's going to tell us, do you want to add that column? And we say yes. and it's been updated. Pretty easy stuff. In the next bit of this lesson, I'm going to jump in and change this drop-down box to a simple input box like the title box there, so you can type in tags and separate them by comma. But before I do that, I just want to show you something. So I've inserted some tags already. I just want you to go into the post controller, and just before the admin add actually saves the data, just after the checks if the data is not empty, I want to do a PR out, and you'll find out what PR is in this lesson as well. I want to PR out this data, and we'll say exit. I just want you just to look at this. So come back into the application. I want to highlight some tags. We'll put in a title and some body in there. We'll hit submit. I just want you to look at this array here, the tag array, and you can see that there's another key in there called tag, and then it's got all the IDs for the tags there, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to turn all those tags we submit in an input box into an array, and that's how we're going to do it, and you'll see that later on in the lesson. I'm just doing this bit here so the lesson makes more sense, and I want to delete out all those tags we have in our table right now. So I'm going to do a delete from tags, and we'll go back and do a refresh, and we have no tags in there. So I'm going to leave you there and keep going with the lesson. And just make sure you remove the PR and exit out of there. Save. Alright, so before we go any further, I just want to alter our views a little bit. You can see here if we go to add posts, we get a drop down box for our tags because a tag has and belongs to many posts and vice versa. We need to make this into a simple input box so we can separate our tags by comma, alright, like we're trying to build our behavior to work. So we can easily do this. We just jump back into our application. We just want to jump into admin add, and we just want to turn this into tags, the name of our new column we just created. And we also want to jump into our controller up here, post controller, and we want to remove our tags from the list because down here we're getting a list of all the tags, alright, and that's happening on admin edit and admin add. We're running that method there. We don't need that anymore because it's a waste. We're not going to have a drop down box with tags in it. So we'll just remove that and remove this, and we'll hit save. If we come back here now and do a refresh, you see that we have our tags box exactly like how we want it. It might be a good idea to share that change between our add and edit views, so let's do that. So to share things between views, we create an element. We'll jump in here, we will cut this out, and we'll jump into our elements directory, and we'll create a new directory in here. I want to call this one admin just to separate our backend from our front end. So we'll keep all our Cake CMS stuff inside here, and all your interface stuff for the front end of this website you'll put inside the elements directory. So let's jump in there and do this. So we'll call this one form post just like we did in the other lesson, and we'll say Cake template, and we'll paste this in there. We'll go back into admin add. We just want to do a element include, and it's in admin form posts. Just make sure there's a semicolon on the end there. We'll just copy that. We'll jump into admin edit, making sure that we keep the ID in there so we can do our edits on our records in our table because Cake needs that ID, the record to work, and then we just paste in the rest, and that should be pretty self-explanatory. So now we're sharing that between our views. So let's just do a refresh to see that everything works, and everything is working. So that's good. So before I go any further right now, I want to introduce you to callbacks. A callback is a giant red phone. A callback is a bit of logic that runs before, after, or on method calls inside controllers, models, and behaviors. If you want to sneak in some logic just before or after a Cake PHP model or controller operation, use callbacks. Controllers and models are always waiting on callbacks. It's the nature of the business, yada, yada, yada. What we want to do is we want to collect the post data from our form, that being this form right here. Alright, and we want to affect the tags data because we're going to pass in a string. Alright, we want to affect that data and turn it into an array and then give it to the model, and then we want the model just to save that data. So that's what we're going to do. And we can do that because the before save will run before the model actually saves that data. So we can affect the data before it runs the save. So if we look in here in our controller posts, we can see if we're on the admin add, that before save will run just before this happens. Alright, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you get used to these filters, it's pretty powerful stuff. So let's jump back into our behavior and create a before save. Alright, so we'll just call this one before save, and we want to pass in the model, of course, by a reference. And I just want to show you guys something. So I'm going to do a PR, and I want to PR out model data. Now this parameter, alright, holds the data from our posted form. Now it's going to have the first key that we're going to have to look at will be the key of the name of the model submitting the data. And we can get that, okay, from the model that's using this behavior. So we can say model name. Alright, if we come down here and we go exit, just like that, we'll now be able to test this out. But first we better attach this behavior to our model. So we'll jump on the post model, and we want to make sure that our model acts as taggable, acts as, throw in an array, taggable, and that looks good to me. So now if we come back into our form, we can put in a title. So we can say this is the title, the body, scroll down even more, and we'll throw in some tags. So we'll say PHP, Cake PHP, and throw in something random like monkey. I don't know why, and just hit submit. And now we can see what's happening. We can actually see the data getting submitted, and there's our tags that we want to alter. So we've got access to that. If we go back into our code, you can see that that's happening right here. We're getting that data, and then we're exiting out of the script. So we've got access to that. All we've got to do is use the tags key, and we can turn that into an array and filter it and make sure it's all good. And that's what we're going to do now. So let's do this. So the first thing we need to do is clean up that tag string like we were saying, and return an array. So let's create a method to do that. We'll call it string tags to array, and we'll pass in a tag string, and we'll pass in the model name as well. So we'll say model name. We'll come down here and we'll set up our separator. So we've got something to check in our regular expression. Say sep this settings, of course our model name, followed by separator. Now what I want to do, I'll just come back into our form, is I want to get rid of all that spacing, alright, after any commas, and just make them all join. So it'll be PHP, comma, Cake PHP, comma, monkey. Alright, so I'm just going to clean this up a little bit with a preg and replace. So I'll create a new variable, and I'll call this one tags, and of course we'll do a preg replace. And I would just want to say any spaces, okay, 0 or more, and I want to say followed by a separator, and followed by any more spaces. So we'll say backslash space 0 or more, and we'll go and replace them with the separator. And I also want to trim off the tag string. So we'll do a trim on that first. So we'll say tag string. And I also want to do a right trim, so anything on the end, and get off that last comma if there's one on there. So we'll say right trim. We'll just come in here and we can throw in the extra parameter, so any spaces and any separators on the end there. Alright, so now we can create our tags array. So just do an explode, and we want to explode on the separator. And of course we want to use our tag string that we just cleaned up, but I also want to make this all lowercase, so we'll say string to lower. And we also want to make sure that they're all unique, so we'll say return, and we'll say array unique, and of course tags. Just going to jump in here and fix a logic error. Even if we get no tags back, there's no tags, we're still going to explode it, and that's going to create a blank tag, which we don't want. So every time we add in a record, we're always going to get a blank tag. So to fix this, I'm going to do a ternary operation and say empty tag. So if it's empty, we'll just pass in a normal blank array, or else we'll explode on it and get back all the tags. So that should make sense to you guys. Continue along. Now we could test this method out. Just come up here and create a new variable called tag string equals, and we just want to collect that tag string from our form, so we'll throw that on there, and we want to make sure that we're using our configuration settings. Alright, so we'll just come up here, add on another key, this settings, of course model name. This is huge to get to this value, but it's what you have to do. We'll say name, we'll throw on label like that, and now we can pass this into our method. We'll just go below our other PR and we'll say this string tags to array. Of course we want to pass in our tag string, and of course model dash name like that. And we'll turn this into a PR. We'll throw a PR around it so we can have a look. Alright, so we just go back into the application here. We'll do a refresh. And you can see that we have all our tags there that we wanted in an array, ready to be saved into our has and belongs to many association. So that's what we needed, and we've got it. But what I want to do now is I want to create another method that turns these back into a string. And that's just because it'll be nicely formatted. People could format this all ugly and stuff, and I don't want that tags column in our post table to be all messed up. I want it to be neat. So we'll now do one that converts it back. Just want this method to be the exact opposite of the other one, so we'll name it the exact opposite. So we'll say array tags to string, and we'll pass in, of course, our tags array. We'll just make it default to a blank array. And we'll say model name. We'll come down here and we'll say string. We'll just say str tags, shorthand, and we'll say blank, and we'll say sep. We'll say equals blank as well. What I want to do here is I want to do a for each loop and just loop over our tags array. So we'll say tags, and we'll say as tag. Come down in here, and we'll say str tags. We'll just concat onto this string the separator, so sep dot tag, and because the separator is blank there, our first tag won't have a comma in front of it, and we'll now update that separator variable to have a comma, so the next one will have a comma in front of it, and it will come out all purdy. So let's do that. Let's say sep, and we'll say equals, and we'll say this settings. Of course we have to throw in the model name, and we want to grab the separator, so we'll say separator like that, and then we just want to come down here and return back our string tags. So we just need to create one more method, and then we'll be able to use all these methods inside our before save and do the magic. So let's do it. We'll call this one find tag ID. We want to pass in the tag, and we want to pass in the model, and we'll say model because we already have this association set up. Tag, we'll set the tag to recursive of 0, so I won't get out any more data than what we need, and we'll say return, we'll say model tag field. We're just going to return back one field, and we just want the ID back. And then we could throw in some conditions, and we can say where tag dot name equals tag. And let's just make sure this doesn't say fin tag ID. A bonk. Save. Now let's finish this behavior off. Thank goodness. We'll just come up here and we'll remove those PRs out. We'll just jump down here and we'll create a variable called tag IDs, and we just want to set it as a default value of an array. We'll come down here and we want to do a for each loop. So we'll say for each, and on this loop I want to for each over the tag. So we'll say tags, and we'll say equals, and we're just going to do a method call inside a for each loop, which is just going to save us some room. We'll say this, we'll say string tags to array, and we want to pass in our tag string. And of course we want to pass in our model name, so we'll say model name, and we'll say as tag. Now I want to check our tag table for that ID, so we'll create a new variable and we'll call this one tag ID, and we'll say equals this find tag ID, and we want to find it by tag, and we want to pass in the model as well. So we'll say model. Then we want to do an if test, and we'll say if not tag ID, we want to create that tag. So we'll say model, we'll say tag, we'll create a new instance because we're going to do a loop here. We need to create a new fresh tag model each time we're going to create a new one. So we'll say create, and we'll say model tag save, and we'll just pass in an array, and we want to save the name of the tag. Of course that name is going to be tag, and then what I want to do is I want to set up the tag ID. So we'll say tag ID equals model tag the ID. We just, when we save that tag, and we'll come down here and we'll set it up in our array. So we'll say tag IDs, we'll say equals tag ID. Now we're going to collect all those IDs, and then at the end what we can do is we can throw them onto the model data. So this is what's going to be saved in our posts underscore tags table. So we can say data, and we can affect that. So we can say tag, and we'll say tag IDs. And the very last thing we have to do is update our tags data, or for our tags column in our post table. So we'll just grab that here. We know that's where that is kept, so we'll copy that. We'll come back down here, we'll paste that in. I'll just minimize that stuff over there, and we'll say equals, we'll use our method we created. What do we call this? Array tags to string. We'll throw in the tags and our model name. Hello, I'm just jumping in here, coming back from the future like the Terminator. I've just come back here to fix a few things up. One thing I want to do is add in a new property, and I want to call this one a model, and we'll say null, and I want to come down here and just use that property now, and we'll say model equals, and we'll get it our referenced model there, and now we can just use the name of that instead of passing it into our methods here. So we can remove that, and we can remove that. We'll scroll down, of course, we don't need that anymore, and we can just throw our name in off the model directly. There we go, and we'll do that for this one as well. Paste in name, and that's a lot better. So continue along, and that is donesies. Just need to remove the exit there, and we have to return true, so it continues along down the chain and actually saves the data. So we'll say return true. And let's go into our browser now and try and save this record finally. We'll hit submit. And what do you know, it saved it. Did we get our tags? Yes, we got our tags. So it totally works. Let's all do the happy dance. Just thought of something else that might help our taggable behavior a little bit. So we'll just come in here and I just want to add a sort on the array so it's sorted in alphabetical order. So the tags, when they go into our tags column, will be in alphabetical order. So we're on map number 6 now, finally, after all that hard work. Well done. Pat yourself on the back. Maybe give yourself a foot massage. It's a bit weird. Alright, up to number 8. We're going to create a taggable helper, which should be highly entertaining. Create a helper to loop over the tags column and convert the tags to links. We can do that. Just want to go into the views directory and go into the post directory and open up admin index. And we want to add in another column, so we'll just go under body, copy, and go there and do a paste there. And then we'll throw in tags, and we'll scroll downsies, and we'll go underneath the body, we'll copy that, and we'll do a paste there, and we'll say tags, if we can highlight that. Oh, there she blues, and we just hit save. And then we go back into here and we do a refresh. And voila, we have our tags. So now what we want to do is we want to create some kind of loop that will explode these tags and convert them into links. And because we want to create some logic, we don't want to put that into our view, we want to put that into our helpers. Because remember, our views are dumb, but helpers make our views smarter. They're the smart part of the view. Alright, so now it's time to create the taggable helper. We'll jump into the views directory, and instead of creating it by our file here or creating it with the bake tool, I'm going to create it with my mind. Created the file. I can't code by mind yet, but I can still create files by the mind. It even created the opening and closing PHP tags for me. I'm getting better. Alright, so we just want to create it. So we want to go to new helper and we want to call this one taggable. We also need access to our HTML helper. So we'll set up a property called helpers. And of course it'll be an array, and that will have the value of HTML helper. So we'll jump down here and we'll also set up a property for our separator, because we got that separator. We're going to have a comma between the tags, so we'll say separator, and its default, put an A in there, default will be comma, and we'll come down here and we'll create our first method, which will be called link, and the first attribute will be the tag name, and the next attribute will be the URL, but we'll default that to a blank array, and we'll say attribute so people can format the tag how they want it to be formatted. And we want to return the link, so we say return, and we say this, and we want to use the HTML helper to create the link, and we run the link method off the HTML helper, and then we just want to say the name of it, so tag will be the name of the link. We want to do an array merge so we can merge on the URL. Okay, and also to our name param, which will be the name of our tag. So we'll say array, and we'll say tag, and of course we'll throw in the URL there, and we want to throw on our attributes so we can format the link, and that should make pretty much perfect sense. And now we want to be able to link or loop over our string tags and convert them all to links. Alright, just before we do that, we'll just set the attribute here to null, because we may not have styles or any attributes we want to add to that link, and that'll throw an error if we don't do that. So let's come down here and create this loop. So we'll call this one string tags to links, and we will create a tags parameter, and we'll set the value to null, of course. It's going to have the same parameters as our link method we just created, and we'll say array, and we'll say attributes, and we'll set that to null by default. We'll come down in here and we will say tags equals explode, and we want to explode on the separator, so separator, and of course we're going to explode on our tags. So now we have our tags in an array. We can set up another thing just to hold on to our links, so we'll say call this one link tags. just going to be a blank string for now, but we're going to concat onto it. And of course we'll set up one for a separator, and we'll just set that as a blank string for the moment as well. We'll come down here and we'll set up a for each loop, and we want to say for each tags as tag, and then we want to come down here and we want to concat onto our link tags, and we want to say equals sep, so it'll be a blank string to begin with, and then we want to concat on our link, so we'll say this link, and we'll say tag, we'll say URL, and we'll say attributes. And then what we want to do is we want to set up our separator to have the value of our property up here. So the next one will have a comma on the end of it. We'll say this separator dot blank string with a space on the end there, so we have some spacing. And we'll just come down here and we'll just return those links. Return link tags. And now we can try this method out. Hello, I jumped in before and fixed up our taggable behavior where we fixed up the dreaded ghost tag. I'm going to do that again, the exact same thing here. So I'm just going to check if our tag string is empty, and if it is empty we'll just send back a blank array, or else we'll explode on the separator. So same thing as we did for the taggable behavior, we're just doing it for our helper now, so we don't get an extra tag coming out. That isn't a tag, it's just a blank. You know what I'm talking about. Alright, continue along. To do that, if you can remember from the last lesson, we just jump into our app controller and we just need to include it. So we go into the helper's property and we just say the name of our helper we want to include, taggable, and then we can come back into our admin index. We can use the taggable variable now. What do we say? String tags to links. We'll come back in here, we'll throw that on there, and we'll go back to our application and do a refresh. And wouldn't you know it, we've got our links. It all looks good when we click on it. Look at that, it does the tag and that. We'll get all this to work. Totally awesome. Next part of the map. Alrighty, time to create our search. First thing we have to do is create our form so we can submit some data and get something back. We're just going to create a simple form, and it's going to have a method of get and an action of index and a query field. So let's do that now. We'll jump into our application and we'll go into the views directory and we'll go into the elements directory, admin directory. We'll create a new element and we'll call it form search.ctp. And we just want to create our form. I've got it on shortcut, and you'll notice here the first parameter on the create method of the form helper, you'll see that I've got it set as null. It's not set as a model name because this is just a search form. We're not using it for any type of model, and this will just send back to whatever action, whatever controller we're on, and the action index. So let's create a input box. We'll jump in here and we'll call this input box query. We'll just call it Q for short. And we'll come in here and we want to set a couple of attributes up on it, and we'll say label equals nothing, and we'll set up a value, and we'll say value will equal query length of it. So we'll say length equals 20. So let's just jump above it and create that Q variable. So we'll say Q equals is set. Of course, we just want to check that this param's named params, and we'll say named, and we'll say Q. And if that's set, we will set it to that value. So we'll just grab that, copy, throw that in, or else we'll just set it to null. Now we can include this element, so we'll jump into our posts admin index. We just want to do our element include. We'll throw it in between a couple more breaks just to keep this formatted for now. Go like that, and we'll just say admin, of course, and whatever we called it, which was form search. Make sure I got a semicolon on the end there. Come back into our application. We'll click refresh. And you'll see we have our beautiful form there for searching. And if we search, say, body like that, we're just going to do a search for that word. You'll see that we get a get params. Now we want that to be name params, and we also want that value to be inside our search. So we're going to have to create a new method on our redirect component to do this. So we'll do that right now. We just want to jump into the controllers directory, components directory, redirect component, scroll down z's, and we can create this method. So we'll call this one URL to named, and we'll come down here, and we want to create a new variable, and I'm going to explain how this works. So we'll just create the variable for now, and we'll say this controller, and we want to grab the params, and we want to grab the URL params. And now I'm just going to do a PR out here of our URL array, and we'll just do an exit here. And we'll jump back into our post controller. Oh no, here we go. And come in here, and I just want to say this redirect URL to named. We'll come back into here, and we'll just do a refresh, making sure that you've got something up here as well, like a query. And you can see that it's collected that parameter inside that URL param. Alright, so we need to somehow move this over into the name params. And we can do that. We'll just jump back into our component, and let's do this. First, I want to unset this value here because it's not needed for our redirection. It'll just stuff things up. So we'll remove that. Jump back into here, and we'll say unset. And we want to unset URL array URL key. And then what I want to say is if not empty, URL array. Just want to do this controller redirect, and we want to redirect back to our URL array, and this method will automatically turn all those get params into name params, which is totally rad. It's an awesome method, this redirect method. So let's do that, and we'll say nullsy for header stuff, and we'll return true to exit out, and we'll delete all this stuff out. Get rid of all that. Come back into our application and do a refresh here. And you'll see that we get exactly what we want. So it redirected back to there, and we have our value inside our search box, which is rad. Now we have all that working. Time to get our search going. Now I want to add full text searching on title and body columns. So let's do that right now. Let's log into MySQL. We'll say -user and password, and I want to use the Cake CMS, and we just want to run, show you the file, say source, and we'll just jump into our source code directory, lesson06, and we want to grab into lesson files, and we want to grab the properties of that. So we'll just grab all that, copy, and jump back into our command prompt, paste that in, and we just want to say full text .sql, hit enter, and we just did that. So now we have full text searching, and let's also just delete out all our posts so we can re-index every record we add in from now on. So let's just do a delete from posts. Now when we add in records, they'll be indexed. Now we have no posts in our posts table, so let's also clean up the tags table and also the post underscore tags table. So we'll just do a delete from tags, and we'll do a delete from posts tags. And now we have clean tables, and let's now create our schema file. So let's just exit out of there, and we'll run cake schema generate, hit enter. We want to create a snapshot, and I'll hit enter. We should have schema number 5 inside our config SQL. Now this schema file is not correct, and I'm going to have to find out why it's not getting built correctly with the full text searching, and I'm going to do some checking on that. But for now, it should be fine as long as we don't delete our posts table. We should all be good. But I'll be finding out what's going on in the file here, maybe by the next lesson. So let's just continue along and finish this lesson off. So now we want our search form to work, so we need to create some search conditions, just like you normally do in all your PHP projects. To do this, we just want to jump into our application, and I want to throw all our conditions inside app controller. Just keep our other post controller really clean, and we won't have all those if tests in there. And it's also application specific, so there's no need to create a new component for this search. You could just, every application has different search criteria. So I find it easy just to put it into app controller. Let's call our search method something easy to remember, like search conditions, and we'll throw in params, and we'll just set the default to null. We'll come in here and we'll say conditions, because we're going to set up an array to hold all the conditions for our search. Give it an array value, and we want to do an if test, and we just want to say if is set params named, and of course query or queue. We want to attach some conditions, so we say conditions, and we're going to do a match on our full text, so we'll say match post dot title post dot body against, and we want to say question in Boolean mode equals our param query, so we'll throw that on there, and we'll just close that off. Now we just need to return back our conditions, so we just say return conditions, and now we could use this inside our controller. So let's jump into our post controller. Now we can use the conditions, so let's set that up. Conditions equals this search conditions, and we'll throw in the this params, so we can access them inside that method. It's paginating, so it's paginating post, and we just want to throw in our conditions, so we'll say conditions. So I just want you guys to add in about 3 or 4 different rows into the post table. Just make them different and put in whatever you want, different tags and stuff, because we're going to use them as our test data. I'm just going to use my mind to do it, so let's do this. Whoa, I just shit my pants, but it worked. That's a good thing. Check this out. So we've got 3 records in there, and we just need to do a search on a word that's greater than 3 characters. So let's search on that. I'm just going to do a search on chicken while my phone rings. And we can see there that we've got 1 record back. So I'm just going to answer my phone. Now it's time to get our statuses to work, which shouldn't be that hard. Let's just go and have a look at our HTML template here. And you can see that we've got some statuses up here. We're going to have all published and drafts. And you'll be able to click on them and you'll get all the published ones, or all the drafts, or all of the posts. So we're going to do that now. First thing we're going to have to do is go into MySQL again. And we just want to insert into statuses and set name equals published for the first one, so we'll say published, and we want to insert another one called drafts, and now we've inserted those rows. So if we say select asterisk from statuses, we should have one with the ID of 1 and another one with the ID of 2, published and drafts. And now we want to add a counter cache column to our statuses table. What that will do is it'll keep count of what's in published and what's in drafts, and we'll be able to add them both together and get the total of posts. So that's going to be pretty cool. It's a bit of Cake magic. So you just want to make sure you're in the application directory, and we want to run Cake schema, and we want to run generate, hit enter, and we want to create a snapshot. Now we can jump into our schema6 file and alter that statuses table. So we're going to config SQL schema number 6 We'll remove all the other tables we don't need, so we don't need the posts and all these other tables, we just need the statuses table. Remove all that. We just want to throw on an integer column, so we may as well just grab the ID column, throw that underneath here, call it post count. Alright, so this is our counter cache column. Come to the end here, remove the primary key off there, of course. Hit save, come back into our application. We want to run cake schema run update snapshot number 6, enter. It's going to tell us it wants to do that. It wants to add that column on there. We say yes. And donezies. Now we can set up the counter cache inside our model. So now we jump into our post model and we can update that to have the counter cache. Models, post, scroll down to our belongs to association and we'll come underneath there and we'll say throw in a new key, and this one's called counter cache. You can, of course, you can read more about it on the documentation. Counter cache equals true, but you're going to see how it works anyway, so you'll have a good understanding of that. We just hit save, and now we can come back and try this out. Jump into our application. We can create a new post, and we'll say test post. We'll say hi, I'm a test. Should put the apostrophe in there, and we'll come down here and we'll say, we'll put this one in drafts, say, and we'll say tags, and we'll say test, whatever. I don't know what to say. We'll hit submit, and that all saved. So let's jump back into our command line. Let's go to MySQL, user, Limac, password, use Cake CMS, select asterisk from statuses, and you can see there that it counted it. See how it counted? There's one in drafts. So if we go back, we can update the rest of this. If we come back to application, we add in another test post. So we'll say test post 2, I'm a test 2, and we'll come in here and we'll change this to published, and we'll leave the tags the same. We'll hit submit, and we'll come back to our MySQL and we'll do another select out, and you can see that now it's counting what's in published and what's in drafts, which is totally rad. We've got a few other things that aren't in any categories right now. So if we go back to our posts, we should just fill in the rest of these ones. So let's just edit each of these so we put them into a category. Throw this one in published. We'll go back to posts. We'll throw this one in published too. Hit submit. Go back to posts. And we'll throw this one in published as well. Published, submit. Go back to posts. And that is totally rad. Now we'll have to set up some search criteria, and we'll also set up those links here. So let's do that now. So now we want to create these toggle links, which will be quite simple. Now these are application specific, meaning that we don't want to use these in other applications. So whenever you want to create a helper that you're not going to reuse, all you do is use app helper. Okay, these are where all your default helpers or application specific helpers go, because we're not going to share these with other applications. So let's remove that comment out. You can just fill this up with as many helpers as you need for your application that are application specific. So let's create one and call this one toggle status, and we'll call this one name value for those parameters, and we just want to set up to see what status we're actually on. So we'll say equals is set, and we want to check for this params named status, and if that's set, we will set that to the value of status, or else we'll just set it to null, and I'll close that off. Come down here, we need to set up some attributes, and we just want to do a little bit of a test here to see what's going to be active. So we'll say status equal to value, and if that is, we'll need to set it as active. So we'll say class active. Now this is just a style sheet I'm going to apply to it, or else we'll just set that to null. Then what I want to do is I just want to set up the URL, so we'll throw URL in, and we only want to set up URL to another status if it's not equal to all, and you'll see why when we get it all working. So we'll say all, then we'll say array action index, and we want to set up the name param status, and of course it's going to have the value of name, or else it will just go back to action index. Then we just want to return the link, so we'll create a link, we'll say link, and we'll say name URL attributes, and that's pretty cool. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to create a request action, and I'm going to show you what that is. So just jump into post controller, and these are very handy indeed. We're just going to create a comment, and we'll just call this request actions. Just create a action as usual and say statuses, and now we just want to access the statuses, so we can go down the association chain, the relationship between posts and statuses to get to that, and we can say recursive, set that to 0 so we don't get out any more records than what we need to get out, and we'll say return this post status, we'll say find, and we'll say all. Now I'll show you how to use a request action. So what we can do is we can just go into elements, admin, we can create a new file, and we can just call this one toggle statuses.ctp, and we'll just start up PHP, and we'll create a variable, and we'll call this one statuses, and we'll say it equals this, and we're going to run a request action, and you can run this from inside your views. It doesn't have to be inside an element. Posts statuses. Alright, and that's going to call that action just like it would up in the address bar. Alright, but it's going to call it from inside there. So it's going to call that, and it's going to get the value of what we return there, which will just be all the statuses. So now we've got that in that variable there, which is very handy. Alright, so now let's set up a for each loop to loop over those statuses. Quite easy to do. We will just say statuses as status, and inside here we will open up PHP again, and we want to set up a new variable, so I might come down here and I might define it before we begin, which might be a better idea. So we'll say first one I want to set up is all count, and the default will be 0, and that will hold the value of all the drafts and all the published posts, and we'll say status links, and we're going to concat onto this empty string, and I'll show you what we're going to do. So we'll come down here and we'll say status links concat HTML helper. That's how we can get to our toggle status, and then we can just jump in here and say status name. Now if you were to do a PR out of that data, you'd see that the key is status name to get to the name. And we want to throw in for the value the name as well, so we'll copy that, throw that in, and I want to concat on the end of this string the count, so we'll just go on the end here, do a dot, we'll minimize that, throw in a double quoted string, we'll throw in some brackets, throw in some curly brackets, and inside here we'll say status We'll say status, and of course we'll say post count, which we set up before, that column that holds the count. Alright, so let's set up the total. So we'll just come down here and we'll say all count, and we'll plus and add on to status. I'm sure you know what I'm going to do here. Status post count. That will tally up all of the values. And we might as well get rid of some of these opening and closing PHP tags. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of all these. Oops. Get rid of that one. And that one as well. That doesn't look too bad. Alright, so now we've set up all that stuff. Let's get out the values. So we'll say echo, we'll say HTML, we'll set up the all link, so we'll say toggle, status, we'll give it all, we'll say all for the value. I'll do that lowercase. I actually want these to be lowercase. Come in here and we'll throw in our total count, so we'll go in there, echo out all count, maybe put some spacing in there, maybe even throw some spacing in here. And we'll just echo out the status links. So echo out status links, and that's cool. So I'm just collecting all those into a string there. I'm going to echo them out at the end, so we've got our all count value. So just before we go any further, I better make sure that says post count. I'm so used to doing the camel case. Just fix that up. Now all we have to do is include this element, so we just jump into our post directory and go into admin index, and we'll just throw it in below those two break tags. Just include it in, so we say admin toggle statuses semicolon, back to application, do a refresh. And how cool is that? So there's a total of 5. We might just put another break in there. Breaks. That'll make it look pretty. We'll jump back in here, do a refresh. Maybe throw on some spacing. Jump back in there. And we'll throw on just a little bit of space. Do a refresh. That's the ticket. Look at that. Pretty. Maybe a space on there too. So we'll jump in here and throw a space on there. We'll jump back in there and do a refresh. That looks better. All right. And now we want to make these links work, so we just have to append to our conditions array inside app controller. So let's jump in there and do that. So we just come underneath here and we'll say if is set, and we just want to check for params named status. Now what I want to do is I want to throw in some hard-coded statuses in here, because we're only going to ever have 2 statuses. So we'll say statuses equals array, and we just want to throw in the name of it. So I'm just going to say publish is our first one, and its ID was 1, and of course our other one was drafts, and its IDs too. If your IDs are different, please make sure you change them. And then we just come down here and we can say conditions, so we're just going to append to the conditions array. We can say post dot status ID equals statuses params named, say status, and just to make it even more secure, let's check that array for those values. So let's say and is set. We'll just grab this, copy, paste, and we'll come back into our application and click on one of the links. So we'll click on drafts, and that totally worked. And it got back the drafts, and we'll click on published, and we got back all the published, which is totally awesome. So it's all working. Good work. Now we've got a few things we have to still do, like our has and belongs to many conditions, and that will be for our tags. So we'll be able to click on tags and get those back. But we're not going to finish that in this lesson because we've gone to our hour long. It's been a pretty full-on lesson. I'm tired. You can probably tell by my voice. You should be probably tired too. If you're not, you're a machine, and you can go on to the next lesson and finish this part off. There's still 2 more lessons to go. Next lesson, this will take us about 15 minutes to get these 2 parts done, and we will continue along. It's going to be a big lesson next lesson. I hope to see you guys there, and thanks again. Oh, that hurt a lot.